And I'd like to welcome you to the workshop on Figma as a tool for problem solving and design communication by Angela Martinez and Carla Gould. Carla, and they are both product designers at NPX and very skilled in UI UX and design elements. So you guys can take it away from here.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Angela, one of the product designers at NPX. This is Carla, the other half of the NPX design team. She is also my research counterpart, whereas my background is more heavily in UI and web development. So today we are going to share a bit of we're going to show two things. We're going to talk about design thinking, and we're going to do a bit of a prototyping workshop. So in advance, if you could have Figma ready, that would be great. I'm going to hand it off to Carla.
Great. Hi, everybody. Great to have you here right now. Okay, so to kick things off, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to dive into design thinking as it relates to where you're at in this hackathon. Our objective is to give you information that can be applied specifically to this really short timeline that you're working with. Design thinking, in essence, is a very long or can be quite a broad cycle. And I know that you may or may not have an idea of what it is. So if you're new to it, this will be a little bit of an intro. And if it's familiar to you, then we'll just be giving a bit more detail there. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And I know that there's a link. Angela, are we sharing the link to our Figma?
Sorry, I'm muted.
Or I can share the link right here, or I can screen share here. All right, so what you should see in front of you is our design thinking presentation. Let us know if you can read this okay. It's like quite a short.
Yeah, if anyone in the chat can let us know if the screen share is coming through, or I guess otherwise, that would be great.
Okay, awesome. So the reason we wanted to present here in Figma is because this is sort of the bread and butter for a lot of design work that happens at NPX and also throughout our careers. And it provides a little bit more of a fluid presenting style. If you're ever presenting yourself, Figma is a great way to get people inside the file also. But for the purpose of our session today, we're going to just cover the design wheel. So as it comes to digital design, there is a fairly specific design thinking cycle that is used with practitioners. And the way that it starts is very user-centric. And it starts with this idea of understanding who it is that you're designing for. Oftentimes, as a creator, whether you're coding or a designer or illustrator, whatever it is, you kind of have an idea that comes to mind, and then you want to work with that specific idea. What design thinking really folds into it is just the story of your users, the people who are going to be using or viewing or experiencing your final products, whether it's an app or some experience. And when you understand who the people are that are going to be experiencing your work, that will inform you on where to take it, like the directions that you can take there. So the difference is when you're speaking with your users, you will get insights and your idea will be shifting, informing, and changing to best meet their needs. So a great place to kick off and your first stop is under this understanding bucket, you have empathizing. So everything I just mentioned here, where you're understanding your user, you're going to be hearing stories, talking to people that might be using the product that you're working with. An example could be if you're designing a banking app, you want to be talking to people who have checking accounts and who are saving and kind of hear their stories and understand what it is that they're doing. All the information you get from empathizing with your user will then become your opportunity points for your design ideas. The limitation we have with a hackathon like the one that you're in right now, is that you may not have access to your users. So there are ways to kind of hack it. There's things around best practice, creating experiences that are accessible and usable, putting yourself kind of in the shoes of whoever your user is, if it's a nuclear engineer, and then starting to guess and figure out what is the most important things that they need in that role. When you are empathizing, if you're in a fuller kind of project outside of a hackathon structure, you're doing things like meeting your users, doing interviews, talking to them, observing, all that stuff. But for today, you're going to be having a good think on what their main needs will be, and you can start to assume what their wants would be in this experience that you're creating and you're building. If there's any questions, let me know, and Angela will ping me. As we move forward into the next step within our design thinking wheel, we look at the defining. So after you can talk and understand what your user needs, you're going to start to make meaning from it. And this is like opportunities. So when I say the word opportunities, it's like if we were talking to banking clients and we find out that, let's say there's a lot of confusion around budgeting. Let's say the people we're speaking with don't really can't figure it out, don't have it, under their belt yet. That's an opportunity space. How can we help banking customers budget for unexpected expenses? So you can create statements or just really want to anchor down what is the opportunity there. So that's a very big second step here in the design thinking wheel. This is often called like generative questions. How might we be able to create a really efficient budgeting tool for, young adult bankers? That's a generative question, because what it's meant to elicit is all the ideas coming from that question. You want to answer it, and you go all the extremes and many ways of answering it. Our third step here, and this is where you as a team or you as teams are really diving in, is full-on ideation. So you've been given a design problem, you've read your statement, and now you're looking to really, start getting the ideas down. And this is ideating. So again, before you start to do this, or if you've already started, that's cool. Just take a little step back, think about the people that are using your products and what perceived opportunities are. That would be the one little add-on here. As it relates to ideating, this is a super fun, really chaotic process. It can be. As a team here with Angela and I, it's so important to create space where there's no judgment. Any question exploration is fair. Even the smallest little ideas, as teammates, you jump onto this and you can build it out. So ensure that you're creating a space of open communication, because the best innovation that I have seen in my career, and Angela, I'm sure you can relate to, is where people are really collaborative and you're building off of each other's ideas and expertise and history. We're all coming to the table with certain experiences. So a small idea can be added onto. So create a really fun space to ideate. When it comes to ideating, it's important to always kind of bring it back to who your users are and what those perceived opportunities are within the users. So this could look like you, coming up with this crazy banking tool. Okay, great. We've got this idea for the banking tool. How does this work with this particular user group? What was the opportunities we were hearing? Kind of always come back and have the conversation or even ask the questions. And as you narrow down to, that's a great practice. So it's super informed by some evidence or thinking around who the user is. I'm going to pause here for any questions. Angela, is there anything that you're seeing?
Nope. All the comments are question free currently. So
okay, got it.
Yeah.
So the part that there will be a deep dive here in our session today with Angela is around the prototyping. Once you started to generate your ideas, you're going to start to bring it into materializing it. You're going to bring it into something that feels real, that your audience, whether it's like your judging panel or your customers, whoever it is, in our case here, it's the judges and also your own team and other teams, they can click through. So they could have an experience with the idea through some cool immersive prototyping piece. And we'll be going into this a little bit deeper later on. And one area that hackathons don't necessarily get a lot of time to do, but if we were producing a banking app, for instance, we would want to be putting it back in front of our users to test it out, to see how it is being used, if our users are able to interact with the budgeting tool the way we expect it. So these are kind of task analysis techniques, and also just figuring out overall the usability. How usable is this thing? How are the users interacting with it? And the implementation piece is a really big piece of this. And this is with our counterparts who are engineers and developers who are in this conversation a lot earlier with design. For the purposes of our hackathon, this is also a big piece on your team. Or sorry, it may not be. I think we're ending off at the prototyping. But yeah, so this is like a really big lift. So I'm just going to move on here in our little presentation just to talk about some things when it comes to ideating. So this little section of our wheel where we're talking about ideating, keep in mind a few pieces here. So there are some design thinkers, thought leaders that talk about emotional design. And essentially, as humans, we're really kind of built to have an emotional experience with the things we interact with. It could be on a spectrum of like just a slight emotional experience to something that's a little bit more profound, like being immersed in like, I don't know, maybe like a really great flight experience. You're going into an airplane that's redesigned, cool lighting, like it's a little bit more immersive. So there's a spectrum there. But keep in mind as you ideate that positive experiences are ones that kind of elicit like a moment of joy or even just being super usable and seamless and easy to use. You really do not want to be creating hurdles or friction points or miscommunication in your designs. So if you can just sort of think about the emotional experience here. So the big piece is around the understanding to limit feelings of frustration. You want to have deep understanding in your design and have the user know what's happening along the way. Just put yourself in their shoes. And what else can I share here? Yeah, basically like a delightful experience. If you can get there, that's amazing. But at the very minimum, something that's usable and easy to get through as a user. In terms of making your designs appealing, we're just going to train on over to this slide. When you're looking at creating something that's going to elicit a feeling of like pleasantness or happiness in your ideas, there are 3 areas that you can look at. The first is the visceral design. So this really refers to the look and feel of your design idea. So let's say, I know one of our design questions here is looking at kind of like a fairly complex interface for nuclear engineers. But let's say there's like the color palette would need to be very usable first and foremost for that particular user. But maybe there are ways to kind of bring in something that is a little bit more like delightful or pleasant to experience. When you think about various cars that are out on the market, I don't know, so more luxury level cars, when you go into the driver's seat, there's a certain level of experience that has been designed there. The touch and feel, the look, the way the information is displayed and laid out. This is all meant to elicit a visceral response from the customer and the user. So how can this be injected into your design idea? The second area is behavioral design. So this really talks about the functioning of your overall design piece. So you want to look at, as I said before, something that's very usable, but have it structured in a way where the most important things are easy to find or easy to read, and then you can kind of build down the hierarchy from there. Reflective design is a little bit more for fairly large scale projects, But this looks at references of culture or history, just a little bit more like a deep-seated theme that can run through the design. Things that sit sort of in industry in a certain way that would have meaning or be aligned with what's happening culturally as well. So the ones that I think you could really gravitate to in this particular hackathon would be around the visceral design piece, the look and feel of what it is that you're designing to the best of your extent, and also most definitely the behavior of it. This will absolutely minimize friction points, frustration with your users. So these would be the two that I'd recommend. Angela, if there's anything you want to add here too, feel free to jump in. So a quick breakdown here. When we talk about visceral, it's the beauty, it's the sensory, it's the feelings that this design will elicit. The behavioral covers everything from the usability to the functionality of your design, the effectiveness of that use, and how easy it is to kind of get a task complete. And then the reflective is around the deeper themes or connotations that this design will reflect. When these things are not done properly, I'm just going to jump over in here. So we already talked about the importance of looking at the usability and functionality of your design. But when they're not done well, there's a little bit of chaos that can happen. And a great example of this is if you look at some of the history here with like crash test dummies. When vehicles are being tested for their functionality and safety and usability, way back, the physical model that was being worked with was a very specific type of model. So the crash test dummy was built as like a male figure, certain dimensions, and a lot of what was designed in automobile during this time was designed for this particular profile, which isn't equitable across like gender, cultural, all the things. So it was a very particular type of model that was used that created a lot of risk for all the many other users. What this does too is, in my perspective, I think it's actually fairly delusional. You need to look at the realistic range of people, the types of people who are going to be using your products or your experience. Be real about that. And then go to that group and get the feedback you need to properly design those things. So when we're not designing in alignment with our users or thinking about even the behavioral piece around the usability and functionality, we might be missing the mark on really important people using the product, but also the opportunities that they uniquely bring. I'll pause here to see if there's any questions or comments.
Nothing so far. We're good.
Okay, great. So the other piece to consider when it comes to behavioral design, and if we're looking at the functionality and usability, would be a metaphor of where an airbag would be projected out. So this would be, I guess, a little bit more conceptual here, but the distance would be impacted depending on who it is that's sitting there, their size, weight, all of those factors. So just something to think about. And also stage of life that the person is in or the shape of their body, that type of stuff. So this is why keeping these things in mind is really key, because these are huge pieces of a market that are being missed when it's not designed properly. But when it is, it's wonderful. You will be creating a very holistic view. You will be thinking about all your users and all their needs. So some quick takeaways here that we think would be helpful as you move through this hackathon would be really basic questions around who do you think your users are? What are their needs and wants? And what does success look like for them? When you put a marker in the sand of what success looks like, that's your goalpost for when you're building out this project. You have your goal now of what success would look like, and you want to achieve it. When it comes to ideating, again, the tips here from our team to yours is be collaborative, conversational, open, and fair. So when people are ideating, the biggest thing is just to get whatever's on your mind out first. So just put down the obvious, put down the things that are top of mind for you, put it down on paper. If it is available to you, to be able to draw on a piece of paper is really important, or you can grab reference images online, that kind of stuff. But you want to start to build what the idea is. And the first thing is just sort of clearing the slate clean. Just get whatever's in here down first. And then you can start to have the more pragmatic discussions around, based off of our users, based off of the needs that we're seeing, what other ideas can we come up with? So how do the ideas work with all users? And also this idea around prioritizing the content. So if you're a user that is like driving a vehicle, the real primary action is a steering wheel that is able to move to manipulate the car's direction. Then you have all these other secondary functions needed. So once you're able to have an idea of what the priority is, you can start to put the energy towards it and the ideas towards it. And then coming back to how usable is the idea. So this is folding in that behavioral piece where you're looking at, again, the functionality and usability. This is so important and deep pillars for any design process. Whether or not you are designing a product or an application, or even just like doing creative critical thinking on like a business problem in your career, this piece is really big. Some resources we have for the team here, nngroup.com. If you have capacity during this hackathon, there's some really great pieces here. So the Design Thinking 101 is a really great reference. And then also ideation, the ideation resource that they offer. This is also an excellent reference. It kind of breaks it down there. So from this point forward, once you have your idea and you're starting to put it in Figma, the real golden nugget is being able to materialize and execute your ideas. You want to communicate them in a really rich way, which is where the superpower of prototyping can come in. So I'm going to segue over to Angela to take you through how to materialize and communicate your ideas.
All right. Chat, let me know if you can see my screen. I'm assuming it's okay. So I'm going to jump right in. All right. So we're going to talk about prototyping. So what is prototyping? It was mentioned in Carla's design thinking presentation that it is a method of communicating your ideas with the outcome of your designs being tested. I wanted to highlight these three pieces: communicating an intention and ideas being tested. These are all key components to what makes a prototype. Can anyone in the chat tell me the differences between these two common types of prototyping? So there's low fidelity, which I like to call lo-fi, similar to like if you're familiar with lo-fi music. There's also high fidelity, which I like to refer to as hi-fi. Yeah, so if anyone in the chat can share just any immediate differences they see between the two. So low versus high level of interaction. That's good. Yes, exactly. So on the left side, low fidelity, you can see there's like sticky notes with like dialogue. It looks like there's images or like placeholders for images, buttons. There's like this top bar that represents just like your top like phone navigation. And it's just really scrappy. It's pretty rough, but you get the idea of what this is supposed to be. It looks like something you can scroll through with a couple columns, text, images, description. It looks like there's a list of stuff with people in it. Draft and final design, yes. How detailed the design is, lo-fi without color, less intricate, yep. Lo-fi is meant to be changed. You get the user feedback and stakeholder feedback and make some changes. Wireframes versus final design. So wireframes, boxes to show layout versus final design, color, visual design and branding. High is outcome of low fidelity. Okay, so how I like to differentiate wireframes from like a wireframe from a low fidelity prototype is you are right that wireframes do have boxes to show layout. Oftentimes at MPX, when I'm talking to colleagues about the differences between prototyping and wireframing, I always say wireframing, like lo-fi wireframing, its purpose is to communicate layout and just maybe like it suggests functions. But usually we don't test our lo-fi wireframes. What ends up getting tested is anything that ends up as a prototype that you can interact with. So again, that could be with stickies, or it could look a lot cooler on Figma with like clickable buttons and interactions. And yeah, you guys are right. For hi-fi, the outcome is a lot sharper. There's visual branding, there's colors, there's typography. It's a lot more intricate. So it's really helpful to, kind of determine what is right for where you're at in your design process. Prototypes are usually clickable. Yes. Oftentimes they're clickable. They don't have to be. I will also say the way these two prototypes look, this is not fixed. So sometimes a low fidelity can just be like sticky notes that are just stacked on each other to represent a phone, or someone making sketches, like big boxes on paper, and then handing it off to someone to gauge a sense of like, okay, where does your eye go to first? If you're like testing something like content hierarchy.
Angela,
Yeah.
I find too that low fidelity is like such low commitment. Like you're not committed to this idea. You can have the conversation, like you and your team can kind of like take it apart and rework it.
Yeah.
I find it really helpful for that stage.
100%. I think someone said here the lo-fi is meant to be changed, which is, because usually the high fidelity prototype is a lot closer to like the final solution. It's the part of design that starts to feel more real. So we'll get into what makes an impactful prototype. I used some artwork from this artist named Anna Laura Sullivan because her artwork always, like, it never fails to make me feel super emotional in the best way possible. So a lot of the stuff we can recall from Carla's design thinking lesson, but as a whole, design always centers its users' needs. It's free of bias, whether or not it's like digital, or if it's you're like crafting something in like a ceramic studio. It's design lives everywhere. And as I mentioned, prototyping being the closest thing to the final solution, it is also getting as close as possible to meet the success criteria. So typically, if there's bias from the beginning and it's not resolved from the beginning, it will be visible in the outcome, which is why it's really important to be intentional about your prototype. So I like to think of something impactful, especially in design, being made up of two parts. It's powerful, which, as I mentioned, it's intentional. It has, you can tell there's been a lot of care put into it. It reflects the real world. It gives our users like control and freedom, and it empowers them. It enhances their standard of living. The second component would be it is meaningful, it's accessible, it's clear to use. The content reflects the user's needs, it's intuitive, it feels easy, like you don't have to think too hard to, achieve whatever you're trying to achieve, and it's purposeful. So all that together will make something that is impactful. And when it's impactful, it is, visually, it's harmonious. It looks good. It's not jarring. It's effective in function. The feelings that you feel are at the minimum, like comfortable. there's like room for, you know, feelings being a little challenged because it might be different, but at the bare minimum, your feelings are comfortable. It's culturally reflective, and the meaning is clear. Your senses are involved, your users' needs are being met, and ultimately it is a lasting solution. So again, we can recall a lot of this from this section in Carla's design thinking workshop, where everything comes together from like viscerally and slowly makes its way out. So this is how you can all like materialize those kind of more conceptual things into something that people can use, something a little more tactile and tangible. Does anyone have any questions in the chat before I move on?
Just a quick add-on to this is, you know, in business, when you are hitting the nail on the head with these points, you are creating like deep engagement and customer retention and experiences. Like there's such a big business impact that Angela is mentioning here around just the sustainability part of it as you go out into industry after your education. Good to know.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of times, like in our work, we're especially working in energy. Oftentimes, our work is meant to just modernize our solutions. What happens with the task of modernizing something is there is a lot of, we have to be mindful of folks who are both change averse and also just not really, they just don't really know what they don't know. So oftentimes we need to find solutions to like basically hold the hand of our users without imposing anything on them. It's quite a gentle process, but like it is a very strategic kind of method for improving adoption. Is Figma the best tool for prototyping? Honestly, that's a great question. That is a great question, because there is, like, industry-wise, there's a lot of bias around Figma. I love Figma for just anything because I know how to use it. I know the tool very well. But my philosophy is you can prototype with whatever works for you. The goal is you are communicating your ideas, and your ideas are able to be tested, and like with that you can continue to iterate. I think Figma is a great tool because it also has it accommodates for developers. It also accommodates for like non-designers. My younger sister, she's in law school and she uses Figma to just like draft up projects and stuff. She just uses like the basic shapes. So I would say Figma might be the most accessible tool in terms of design and prototyping. There are a lot of other really, really powerful prototyping tools out there. For websites, sometimes I use like WYSIWYG sites that have both the drag and drop features and also the ability to do custom code and animation. Just it really depends on your needs. So yeah, I would say Figma is probably the most popular and the most accessible one because it's also free, especially if you're a student and you sign up with like your student email. You can have like the team, I think it's like the team tier with like, it has a lot of extra benefits and you can get that for free. So that is a long answer to say yes, maybe, if it works for you. Okay, cool. That's a really good question. So we'll go into the purpose of prototyping. So what is the purpose? In short, you're able to validate your assumptions. You are able to go back and rework your problem definition. Oftentimes, like I'll leave the prototyping stage and go back into like our insights and the data that we've gathered and look at how we've synthesized the data and be like, are we reading this correctly? There's something off here. This is like where it's okay to be wrong. It's actually a pretty good to be wrong in the design and research and prototyping stage, because when you're wrong, it is just, you're just gathering data. It's being wrong is like rich in information. So that's all helpful here. You're able to also brainstorm ideas. You can determine valuable interactions and ultimately translate data into a solution that is usable. So this is also the part of the process where you can determine if like a drawer menu is more usable than a simple navigation, or if it makes sense to have like to use the button that says submit versus something that says save or save changes with an icon. All these things, this is like the part of your design process where you're able to determine them, and they all make a really, really big difference. So that said, let's make something. So hopefully everyone has Figma open, whether it's browser or the desktop app. They both function the same. The only difference is for the desktop app, you are able to use custom fonts. I don't think you can do that for browser. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me know in the chat if I'm going too fast, if you have questions in terms of using the tool. Don't worry about making whatever you have look exactly like mine, because it probably won't, because we have time constraints. And also I move around Figma a lot differently from how someone else might use it. So this is our final product, kind of. I have an asterisk there because not exactly, but we'll get real close. We're going to make a few screens, okay? And some of our goals will be, I'm going to teach you how to use the grid. You love the kitty. I do too. It's a really good cat meme. So we're going to learn the grid. The grid is really important in digital design. Spacing is very important. Since we're making this on like a mobile screen, I'm using like at the size of an iPhone 14. I'm going to show you how to set up your columns and how to like utilize that in your design. We're going to make 2 components with variants, and we're going to use those components to design 4 screen layouts, and we're going to make them interactive. So someone, like a user, should be able to click through them and hit the back button and just go back and forth. You'll have literally an end-to-end experience at the end of this workshop. All right, so first things first, get your frames set up. Here are my dimensions. We're going to have 4 frames. It's going to be 390 pixels in width and 844 pixels in height. There are a couple hotkeys, or a few actually, that I'm going to teach you in this lesson. But when you're done setting up your frames, usually I label them. It helps because, you know, I end up working with like 40 plus frames, sometimes hundreds. So the first one will be like storefront. The second will be new releases, new products, and product page. It's fine if you don't name them because there's only 4 screens, so you're not missing out. And I'm going to show you how to set up our 2-column grid. So grids are really important because spacing is like everything. It's the structure around and within and in between our content. It gives the design room to breathe. It helps us create visual hierarchy. And it is like a strategic and harmonious way of just laying out all your information. So in Figma, if you want to create your columns, let me remove mine.
Quick question, Angela, on the different dimensions for if it's tablet, mobile, desktop.
Yep.
If it's tablet, is there sort of like a rule of thumb there on the column amount there?
Yes, they're for all digital screens, I think, with exception to like a big, what do you call those? It's like an overhead projector. I think with exception to that, almost all digital screens like follow like some sort of grid system, whether it's columns or rows or columns and rows. And where this comes from is from the browser. So the developer who is making this and developing it into an actual tool needs to know like how many columns there are or column widths. For the purpose of this scenario, we are not engaging with the developer, but almost always, if you're like, in my experience, I've always worked alongside some sort of software engineer or a front-end developer. And it's really important to develop a relationship with them. Did you catch that? I said develop a relationship with them. But it's helpful because they're the ones implementing all the designs. And sometimes they'll also come back to you and say, hey, this isn't going to work. And that's where you kind of work as a team to rework these, like the design with these new constraints. That's a great question, Carla. Thank you. All right, so I assume we have all of our frames set up, and we're going to select one of our frames. So we'll do the first one. We're going to hit Layout Grid, It's on the right panel in the middle, and you're gonna go hit plus. So you should have some sort of like, it's like, yeah, just like this grid diagram show up. We're gonna select the icon to the left of the grid title. It should, if you hover over it, it should be layout grid settings. And we're gonna hit the grid drop down and select columns. Dimensions are for which phone? I think this is iPhone 14. Yeah, this should be iPhone 14. All right, so back to our grid. You should hit the drop down. Instead of grid, it should be columns. And for count, I'm gonna have you put in 2. So your screen should just have 2 like rectangles on either side with like a white line down the middle. For margin, we're also gonna do 20 pixels, which is usually the standard for left and right padding, which is just another word for spacing. Again, a term that design has taken from web development. So your margin should be 20 pixels, and your gutter you shouldn't have to change your gutter. It should be 20 pixels as well. That should be good. All right, so this is what your grid should look like. You can toggle visibility by hitting Control G. It should be the same for Mac and Windows. So this is really helpful. It's super fast. We'll keep it on for now. And we're gonna add this grid to the library. So if you select on the layout grid section of your right panel, there are these 4 buttons. You're gonna select those 4 buttons and you're gonna hit the plus sign. This is how you create a new grid style and add it to your library. So you're gonna name it, I already have one that says 2-column mobile. I'll do 2-column mobile 2. Don't worry about description. Once you've named it, just hit create style, and you should be able to access that like anywhere in the file. So if I remove this grid from the rest of my screens, you can select all of them at once. Layout grid, hit the 4 dots, go into just select the grid that you created. It should apply to everything. Let me know if anyone's got any issues. But besides setting up our grid, that is done. We now have a grid in our library. Before we move on, really helpful tip. There are 2 ways to view your prototype in Figma. So one way, I think it's like the classic way, is if you go to the top right of the screen, you hit the play button, and it'll show you like a full screen preview. I really like doing like it's like an inline preview. So if you select a frame and you hit shift space, you can view your design like as a prototype as you build it. Really cool, really helpful. Yeah, so 2 hotkeys. Control G to toggle your grid visibility, and shift space to view your frame in proto mode, but like inline. I don't know the official name for that. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. So these are 3 next steps. We're gonna make a list and top bar component with variants. We're gonna create standalone UI elements, and we're gonna make it interactive. Here's a reminder again, don't worry about matching my work one-on-one, because it probably won't, given the time constraints and how fast we're moving. So I wanna show you how I've mapped out components versus elements. So just recall this, we have the word component, which essentially just means like a reusable feature. Oh, how do I get the white border on the left and right side? Good question, Amin. So when you are creating your grid, there should be a box that says margin. Your margins will create spacing on the left and right side of your grid. Thank you, Kyle. Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I've mapped out the difference between components and elements. So a component is like a reusable item or feature or what have you. And an element, I just use the word element as something to represent like a unique standalone item, idea, design. So let's take this apart because there's a lot going on there. So in green, I've highlighted our components. So technically there's only 2 components because our components have variants. So our first instances are, we have this like list design, this list interface. It has like a title and an image placeholder to the right. And it stretches, it's like a rectangle that stretches as wide as our grid. And then we have a top bar. So this is kind of like our navigation. Here it's a menu, but in the other instances, this is what it looks like. The top bar turns into like a page header with a back button, and we have that again and again. So there's a total of 4 instances of this top bar. That is one component. There is a total of 2 instances for this like list interface. So the first one has an image. This one is just text with an arrow button. And I'm going to show you how our elements are mapped out. So what I've defined as elements here are just, again, they're standalone items. We have a headline on the front page, so that's 1. We have these cards, these square cards with text on it, that's 2. 3, we have a vertical card with headline, body copy, or sorry, body text. Copy also just means text, by the way. And we have a number value. So that's number 3. 4, we have just this, I think this is where an image is supposed to be. So that's 4. And number 5 is all of this stuff going on here, this text on that page. So those are 5 unique elements. I am going to move on to creating a component. I'll make it with you guys. I pre-made them for the purpose of this workshop, but I'll make it with you. So list interface has 2 variants, as we mentioned, and the top bar has 4 variants. We're gonna go into our screen with our grid toggled on. So how I made this like little, it's like, what do you call it? I just call it a list interface. I don't know if there's an actual like official word for it. It's just a rectangle. Stretch it from one end of your grid to the other end. It should look like that. If you want to adjust your border radius, it's just select your shape, top right. It's this little corner over here. I think it should be 8 pixels, but you don't have to do that. It's okay if you want to keep your edges sharp. There's a part here that has room for an image. So what I like to do is just copy and paste this rectangle so it maintains a lot of its properties. I just make it this little rectangle a little smaller. And in Figma, you can now edit like manually each corner of your border. So when you go into this part that says corner radius, to the right, there's like these independent corners, this like icon here. If you select that, you can manually change them. So top left and bottom left are just going to be 0. Probably turn that into like a darker color so we can distinguish the difference. Place it on top of your rectangle. Just make sure everything is lined up like that. And let's apply our text. So pretty straightforward. This one says new release. Have it like ideally centered in your list interface. This is what it should look like. I'm going to change the background of my rectangle. It shouldn't be light gray. Make it white if you like, because I have a drop shadow right here. So I'm going to select my rectangle, go into effects, play with drop shadow a little bit. So we have a new release or just a list item with an image on it. Before I make it into a component, I'm going to select everything in here. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to group my selection. Let me know if I'm going too fast, chat, or if you have any questions. So once that selection is grouped, you should be able to move everything as its own. Right click on this item again, and we're going to go down here to where it says create component. So how you know a component is created is the bounding box turns from blue to purple. So purple always means component. So now that we're here, let's try to make this variant. So we have a variant without the image, it just has an arrow. We're going to right click on our component. If you go down to main component, you select this item that says add variant. Now you'll have 2 pieces. So I might speed up because we have 10 minutes. So I'm sorry if I'm rushing. But yeah, still don't be afraid to ask me any questions. I'm going to double click on the image in this variant, backspace. Don't worry about the arrow right now. I like to just start with like using a text. And then I'll drag that layer into the component itself. There you go. So what you can do, what's really fun about this stuff is, let's say you want to use, so this is like your main component. This is like the control. This is the main, the hero. If you want to use it in your designs, you can usually just copy and paste them, and it shouldn't, if you change anything here, it shouldn't change your original component. However, from your original component, you can do stuff like make it pink, and this will affect that. Really helpful, saves you a lot of time if you're making a lot of the same stuff. What's also really cool is on the right-hand side in component properties, next to property 1, there's a drop-down where default is. You're gonna hit variant 2, and now you have access to your other variant. I love this so much. Carla knows how much I love making components in Figma. I like built out a UI library at NPX, and like I just enjoy doing it because it just saves a lot of time. But yeah, anywho, turning this back to white. So this is the screen that we're referencing. I usually take a screenshot of whatever I'm trying to replicate. Place that around here. I don't know if we'll have enough time to make this menu, this top bar. So for the purpose of time constraints, I'm going to move forward. I'm so sorry, you guys. I thought this would be enough time. So this appears on the front screen or the first screen, and then we have its second variant show up on the second screen. This should actually be light gray. There you go, and there's no drop shadow. And this should say new products. All right, so we have our 2 component variants on each screen. I want to because this menu is, maybe we can quickly make a menu right now. If you can keep up, then that's great. But if not, it's okay. But real quickly, I'm going to make a menu. It'll be the full width of this phone, just because that just communicates the hierarchy. It's going to be on every screen. I'm going to call this one storefront. And then I'm going to have a tiny button here that just says menu. This is like, now I feel like I'm like really rapid prototyping. So I'm going to group this whole thing. Group selection. I will probably make this white. Give it, I'm going to make it white. I'll give it a stroke value of 1. And since this is grouped, I'm going to right click and turn that into a component. So now we have a top bar component. Again, we're going to create a variant. So I'm going to add another variant. Instead of menu for the second variant, I'm going to call it back. And instead of storefront, we'll call it, what does it say here? New releases. We're going to make another variant. So right click on one of the components, and you can do, oh, I was wrong. You can right click on the purple border. If you right click on the purple border, main component, add variant, and we have a third variant. So the third variant should say new products with a back button. All right, and I'll do one more. So we have a total of 4 top bar components, or 1 top bar component with 4 variants. Again, it has a back button, and this one is called, as text that says Agile Track. And I'm going to copy and paste each component for like their respective screens. So storefront should go on the first screen. New releases go on the second screen. New products goes on the third screen. Agile, or like this, I think it's like a product display page. Agile Track can go on the fourth screen. Boop, boop. Okay, so this is the part where I show you how to connect all of your screens so they're interactive. You should make a YouTube channel after Ideathon. Oh my God, stop. Thank you. That is very flattering. YouTube is like a lot of work. Also, I don't think I have the capacity for that, but thanks. So on your top right, you hit prototype. You're in prototype modes. You select a frame, and you can see you have options like a flow starting point and interactions and scroll behavior. What we're going to do is we're going to select the new releases component. Make sure it's selected. It'll have the purple bounding box. On the right side of the purple box, you'll see this plus sign. You're going to drag that and select it and connect it to this screen. Don't worry about like animating it. We'll leave it to how it is for now. Probably just keep it as instant. If this is connected, then your prototype is interactive. So one way to view this or to validate this is to select the frame, hit Shift Space, and hit your button. Hit your button. Look at that. It's working. It's interactive. If you're like clicking around your design and you have like parts of it that aren't clickable, it'll highlight for you where you can click, like the actions you can take. All right. So let's do the same thing for new products. Get that the plus sign on the right-hand side, connect it to this screen, the third screen. And I think we have, oh, we don't have like our unique elements. Something real quick, we can just make a rectangle here to represent like a product item. Click this product item. This isn't a component, but you can still make it interactive. Hit the right plus sign again and do the same thing, connect it to the final screen. So now all of your screens are connected. Shift Space to preview your prototype. Hit your buttons. Boom, boom. The only thing we can't do is to go back, but it's really easy to create a back button. So on your second screen is the first instance of your back button. You're going to double click that component and make sure back is selected. Okay, make sure this is selected. On the left side of this back button or this back text, there is a plus sign. Drag that handle connected to the first screen. So that will take you back. That is one way to do it. There's also, should be a plus sign somewhere. Oh, here, this sign. You see this arrow on the right-hand side of the screen? If you connect it to this arrow, it just knows to go to the last screen. So if you do that, for all of your screens, just connect it to the back arrow. It should be fully functional. So let's try it. So we have our menu, storefront, new releases button, boom. Oh, what's this? There's a back button that works. We can go back to the front page. Yeah, so I think that's like at bare minimum what I can cover for prototyping, but it is so powerful with what you can do with just like a couple components and a few screens. Like this is interactive now. If you want to test something, like if this button should lead to that page and just that alone, that is a fully valid like piece of design that you can prototype and test. That's something I do at my job. Sometimes I test if a form makes more sense as a dropdown or as like a pop-up modal, if a submit button should actually just say send, or if the user adoption is strong enough, then maybe we can just turn it into an icon without any text. You can test all of this stuff here. I'm going to preview what the final outcome would really look like, just so you have an idea of like how far this could go. Actually, I'll do it in this like preview screen here. All right. So if I click around, I can only select this button. So we'll hit new release and I can go back, new release again, new products. Okay, so there are 2 items here. I can only select this first one or the back button. So once I hit this first item, I am now on like, this looks like a product display page. I think I should, there should be, looks like there should be scroll here, but the scrolling behavior is not turned on in Figma, which is fine. Yeah, I think at like for like a wider scope of what a prototype can really look like, this isn't even the entire flow of this prototype example. So this is an example of like a login or onboarding screen. I don't believe all of these animations are connected, but you can do like real scenarios where you're testing out how to handle a fail state or an error state. It's also really important to be mindful of language in your design. Also color, sometimes like a really bright red is a lot more, it feels a lot worse than like something more of a cherry red. This is where I really enjoy the visual component of the stuff and also the language. Even more so here, we have like an e-commerce like browsing flow, what it looks like to add items to cart. All of this you can make interactive and test with an actual like user base, get them to do like task analyses and get feedback from them and to revise this into something that looks very close to the final solution. So yeah, that wraps up our design and prototyping workshop. And okay, we're over time by 1 minute, not bad, but I hope that was really helpful for everyone. I know in terms of your guys' design challenges, everything has like an interactive interface. So there's controls, there's buttons, there's like nested functionality, there are success and fail states, all in an effort to make life easier for the user. So when you're designing, there are lots of opportunity to make something impactful. Even if you don't get to the prototype stage, it is still possible to make an impact with your work. But yeah, thanks everyone. I'm glad you were able to join Carla and I. Carla, thank you for such a great presentation. We're gonna send this, we'll send our links in the chat. Anyone with the link is able to view this. So let me just stop sharing my screen. So here is design thinking. It's on FigJam. Feel free to share that with your peers. And here is my prototyping one. Prototyping. Is there supposed to be a 4-letter code word for attendance or something like that? I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Oh, I see everyone joining the links. Okay, great. Yeah, feel free to like use this, reference this. If you want to like practice prototyping a little more, Figma, the community Figma and Figma channel on YouTube, that's how I learned to keep up with all of their software updates. They have like major updates every single summer as a result of their config conference. And that's how I stay up to date. There's a lot of stuff that I still don't know because it's a huge tool, but that's probably my favorite resource for this stuff. Cool.
That's awesome. Thanks, Angela.
Thanks, Carla.
I learned a lot.
Me too. This is great. Yeah, I thought I would have like, this would be like a 30-minute like workshop, but it ended up being I think it was a lot longer than that. So I definitely like over or underestimated the amount of like time this would take. But yeah, hopefully you guys can like use my file. I'll clean it up. So it looks like the
setup is so important though too for the prototyping. Like that's like a lot of the work is in that setup, and then you can do the quick clicking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of setup. The clicking stuff is like a lot faster because that stuff should almost already be mapped out in like the wireframing phase. But sweet,
great. Okay.
All right.
Rehan, I think is coming on.
Yeah, we'll see you in a bit. We're gonna do the booth stuff at around from 1 to 2. So we'll see you there. Bring your questions. We're happy to help.
Yeah.
how do we leave